Today, we're going to be celebrating the annual flower ceremony. And we call it the flower ceremony, not flower communion, because Reverend Chapek never called it flower communion. He called it the flower ceremony. Today, we're going to be celebrating our flower ceremony because it is important, especially in troubled times, to remember that there is beauty in the world. To remember that there is something worth fighting for and living for. To remember that we all deserve to live in beauty. We will celebrate this today because there are so many ugly things. There is so much ugliness in the world around us. And we must fight that ugliness. We share the beauty to remind ourselves that we are all beautiful, that there is something worth working for. We share the beauty to remind ourselves that, like every flower in the garden, there is not one that is superior. There is not a default flower, and there is not a default human. Straight white man is not the default human. Like flowers in a garden, humans need access to food and clean water and air. We need to breathe. And we can't breathe when some among us are being choked off. How can we provide for our garden so that all of us may, as Adam Lawrence Dyer tells us, that we may grow to show posterity, bright, blooming through adversity? Well, I'll tell you. I'll tell you a few things anyway, because I don't have all the answers. Those of us who are white, we need to help amplify the voices of people of color, because you know what? It's not about us. Now this part can be especially hard for you-yous who love to talk. But we cannot center ourselves in this work. We must make sure we are centering the people who are being oppressed. It's not up to white people to tell people of color what they need. That means that we cannot answer Black Lives Matter with all lives matter. We need to center the people who are being oppressed. We need to listen. And when people tell us what they need, we help fulfill those needs. We can use our money. Fund the groups that are spearheading the work, especially those groups that are led by people of color. And volunteer with those groups if you can. Now, stop calling the police. This is a big one. If you're white, you likely have learned that the police are there to serve and protect you. People of color, particularly Black people, have learned a different lesson. This isn't new. It's only that everyone has a cell phone camera now. White people must stop weaponizing the police against people of color. Just this week, 57 militarized police officers in a riot control unit in Buffalo, New York, resigned from that unit. They didn't resign from the police force, mind you. They resigned from the riot control unit because they were upset that 2 of their officers were suspended without pay for shoving a 75-year-old protester to the ground without provocation. Yes, he was out beyond curfew, but they had many tools at their disposal besides shoving him to the ground, where he received a serious head injury. He is in the hospital. And rather than stand up for what was right, and rather than say that was too much force, 57 officers resigned in protest from that unit. In support of the 2 officers who shoved that man to the ground. Stop calling the police. Stop weaponizing the police. Many things can be handled without police involvement. There has been a movement afoot for a long time to abolish the police. If you can't imagine what that would be like, I urge you to investigate this further. There is plenty of information out there. This is not a sudden and new idea. This is well thought out and well planned. And in fact, in Minneapolis, where George Floyd was murdered at the hands of police, there is some movement towards this, towards defunding the police and possibly moving towards abolishing the police in Minneapolis right now. We can examine anti-Blackness and then engage in the work of eradicating it. This is all so hard. Anti-Blackness is more than just the KKK or racist slurs. It shows up in sneaky ways. It shows up in systemic ways. It shows up when we say things like, well, I can understand the need to protest, but that looting, those businesses, once we qualify it, we are no longer understanding the needs of the protesters. Better to say, that looting is really hard, but wow, I certainly understand the needs and the frustrations and the anger of the protesters. Now we are no longer qualifying what the protesters are doing, but centering the anger and the needs of the protesters. It takes work. And I have certainly been guilty of many of these actions myself. We will mess up. We're human. When we mess up, we must fess up. and learn from the mistakes. There are many resources on the Unitarian Universalist Association website, uua.org. The link will be shared in the chat section. We can do this work together. We can make a beautiful garden. We can build the beloved community. Shall we build that together? Shall we build that together? You can answer in the chat section. Shall we build that together? Namaste.